let me go ahead and start my screen sharing. I kind of want to just dive right into what Webflow is. I started making slides, but I'm not going to use them. I'm just going to go into it. So the general agenda is going to be, what is Webflow, why I choose Webflow. We're going to look at the user interface. If we have time, I might do a tutorial, and then we'll also take a look at the resources. Okay. So this is the Webflow website. It's a visual development software, allows you to build websites without writing any code. The difference between this and something like Elementor or Squarespace or Wix is that you can still do pretty much everything you can do with writing raw code. So on the right-hand side, and let me actually just go into the user interface so you can see something really quickly. I'll start a new site. You can see you can just start with some free templates, or you can buy some templates. I'm just going to go ahead and select the portfolio one. And I also want to have that marketing website. So I'm going to skip all of the tutorial. Yeah, so what's interesting about Webflow and sort of what differentiates it from all of those other ones is if you select a section, on the left-hand side, you have all of your layers. This is going to be your skeleton. This is going to be your HTML. And then everything on the right is going to be your CSS properties. And that is fundamentally different from all of the other software that I've seen. The only one that did this was Adobe Muse. Yeah, so you can edit everything from a CSS perspective over here. You can add sections. It's similar to like an Adobe design software, more similar to an Adobe design software than it is coding language. But what's nice about it is you can actually just export to HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and collect all of the assets associated with it. And it's bundled in a very nice way, which is why I call it a visual development software over just a website builder, right? A lot of these website builders, they don't let you export the code. So as a developer transitioning into a visual development framework, this allows you to quickly and easily export, bring it into React, bring it into Vue, bring it into, even if you wanted to start a template website where you're selling HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you could do that with Webflow just by exporting it and then creating some branding assets and putting it up onto a marketplace like Creative Market, yeah, or in Vado Marketplace as well. So that's one of the things that I really like about Webflow. So it's super powerful in terms of being able to edit individual elements. It's also super powerful in terms of editing all of the individual CSS, as well as advanced CSS features, such as using CSS grids or using 3D transformations, as well as they call them interactions, but it's essentially CSS combined with JavaScript animations. And you can manipulate the curve of the animation. So you know how they have ease in, ease out, ease in and out, bounce effects, all done with like curves for animations. If you're familiar with any animation software, you wanted to add a bounce effect, you can do all of that inside of here. You can also do 3D animations, which allow for you to create things. And actually, let me see if I can do a quick search just to show some 3D animation. We have Webflow, credit card animation, 3D. Let's see what comes up. And I'm using Bing. I started using Bing over Google. Rotation on hover. This is the other thing that's super interesting about Webflow is their YouTube channel, their university is the most robust I've ever seen for any of these website platforms. Also the most organized. So I'm not going to actually play the whole video, but you can see the animation right there, and they explain it in 6 minutes, and it's actually really easy to do. But yeah, essentially it allows you to do some pretty cool effects. Okay, let me go back. Again, this is an pretty unstructured talk. I'm not much of a presenter. So I talked about the user interface a little bit, animations, CSS, JavaScript. If you wanted to add components, you can create components, so you can reuse these things: footers, nav bar, card systems. We also have predefined elements, so there's sections, container. Quick stack is new. I don't know what that is. Flexbox. I think they got rid of grid because it's just so easy. You just click a button and you turn it into a grid. Yeah, typography, CMS elements, images, videos, YouTube Direct, Lottie animation. How many of you are familiar with Lottie animation? Okay, so Lottie animation is how you create those really cool like Apple websites where you're scrolling down and images are rotating. It essentially takes a video file and will turn it into a series of images associated with a JSON file that's extremely optimized specifically for web. So you have fast load times with advanced animations. And so you can get those scrolling animations where maybe a vector art is growing from a line. It's really interesting. If you're not familiar with Lottie animations, that's how you create some of the best looking websites in the world, essentially. The ability to upload files. They're getting into e-commerce. And let me go back over here, show you the actual product suite. So they have the designer, which is what we just looked at. The ability to create a CMS. So if you're doing blogs, articles, press releases, you can do all of that stuff there, or working with any sort of content creator. E-commerce websites and animations. They also have some built-in tools for SEO. So before you go and publish your website, it's going to tell you things like, let's take a look if it does it right now. It doesn't because this one has everything, but it's going to tell you this image doesn't have the alt text. So it might tell you that just built in once you go to publish, and it has some built-in SEO tools. Also, if you go to, let me show you how to, sorry, I'm a bit rusty. Yeah, so under pages, if you wanted to modify any of the SEO settings, it's just all right here under SEO. You've got your title tag, your meta description. You also have your open graph settings for adding an image. Also, if you want the text to be different when people are sharing the link versus when they see it on Google, this is how you do that. You just go ahead and either say same as the SEO title tag, or if you want something different, this will show up in Slack, this will show up in WhatsApp, this will show up on LinkedIn whenever somebody copy and paste that link. Versus something like this is what shows up in Bing or shows up in DuckDuckGo or Google. You also have the ability at the page level to adjust whether or not people can search for it. You can add custom code into the header. You can add custom code into the body. Super powerful piece of software. I'm not going to save that. So that's what it does. What else did I say I was going to cover? Why I choose Webflow. The ability to export and just the sheer speed. So I used to work in WordPress, and I was always concerned about security and performance and configuring individual WordPress websites. Like, it's just a bit of a time sink, and the client has no idea what you're doing. They don't care about what you're doing. As long as the website gets done, that's all they really care about. And like, what's the monthly fee going to be at the end of the day? And that's for startups. I can't speak for other businesses or more tech savvy industries. But yeah, so I went from WordPress, dealing with security issues, having to back things up manually, configuring a whole bunch of things, to Jekyll CMS, which is even more bare bones, where you're actually coding HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and you're using the Shopify Liquid templating language in order to templatize everything, like the nav bar and the footer, over to this, which that one was super secure, but it took time to actually put things together. This one, from that, I went from a 2-week workflow where 1 week I was designing, 1 week I was coding, to essentially like a 1 week or a 2-day workflow where 1 day is dedicated to design or 2 days is dedicated to design. And then I spent about 2 hours actually putting it into Webflow and making it responsive, which was dramatically faster than what I was doing before. And the only reason that's possible is because I do have the years of experience with design and development. And then I spent 6 months learning Webflow before implementing it at production level at a large company. Yeah. So that I had to do my due diligence with the software. I had to convince the executives in the company that this was more secure than anything that they were using before and would require a lot less maintenance and easier to edit. Mm. One of the things that sold the marketing person is the ability to bring in editors. So the client doesn't need to see the designer, they don't need to see the CMS. All they need to look at is the editor, which looks fundamentally different from everything else. All you're doing is you're looking at the website and a little bar shows up at the bottom of the screen and it allows you to change text, change images, and really nothing else, right? You're not changing layout, you're not changing nav bar structure. Maybe you're adding a blog, but you can do all of that directly from the editor. I'm not sure if they do a great job on the website showcasing. Yeah, so this is sort of what the editor looks like. Just a little bar that pops up at the bottom of the screen. So there's a lot of tools for developers. It's designer friendly. It's good for marketers. From a maintenance perspective, you don't have to worry about security. You don't have to worry about configuring AWS or setting up a static server. And if you need to work with a developer, you can export. So you can create a design system that works for both you as well as larger teams. And you can maintain that design system within here. So it has more uses than just building marketing websites and e-commerce websites. It allows you to also work with developers just building their front end as well as doing animations and anything they might need. What else did I want to talk about? We went over the user interface a little bit. And it looks like we have, oh, let me go into resources before the tutorial. So we took a look at the product section. We're taking a look at the editor right now. Under the solution section, there's plenty of information here for different use cases. I'm not going to get into any of that, but you can search that for yourself. And under the resource section, this is kind of what sold me on Webflow, is you're able to browse templates. You're able to browse what other people have made inside of Webflow. You can sort the things that people have made inside of Webflow to clonable sites. So now you can look at this stuff and you can actually just click into it. Maybe there's let's just look at this one from Webflow University because it's probably very robust. We can go ahead and clone that site, or we can open it in Webflow, or we can view the live site. Looks like it's glitching at the moment. Okay. And we can see, this is an interesting website. Let's see, they didn't do much here. So it's probably not worth cloning, but if you wanted to, you can just clone it. You can open it inside of the designer view and you can start seeing how they did what they did if you wanted to learn that way. If you're more of like a reverse engineer type of learner, I know I am. So this is a great way to do that. You can also click that into place so it always stays there. I can show the responsive nature quickly. You got the different versions. This is the default version, which is, I'm not sure exactly what that breakpoint is. It looks like it's about, not sure. Anyway, you have additional breakpoints that allow you to have even more customizability, maximizing the screen size to like a 1080p monitor. So if someone wants to be very particular about how responsive it is, you can get pretty granular. You can't adjust all of these things, but 9 times out of 10, you don't really need to. Okay, so that is the made in Webflow clonable section. Right. There's just tons of things that you can take. You just keep going. There's some really interesting companies in here. So let's see if we can find Webflow plus HubSpot Forums. Again, Webflow University. I would probably just start with the Webflow University stuff. So you can see all of the stuff that they're giving away for free that's clonable. Calendar for space travel, adding search functionality and filters, form tooltips, just all of these advanced components that you don't need to create yourself, and you can just take from other Webflow users. And then there's the stuff that you can purchase over here, which is the actual template store. I like to browse the UI kits. And let me see, there's a free section somewhere. Where are all the tags? There's free. Okay, yeah. So there's browse all free templates. This is another way to look at things. You can build dashboards, which is pretty cool. Maybe some of you are like into building dashboards. You can do that inside of Webflow as well. And this is a free dashboard that you can just download and take and start have as a starting point. Let's see what else we have in here. What's a good looking one? Marketplace. Oh, this is my dashboard. Does anybody have any questions?
For the editor, does it edits site wide? It's not like selective about like, hey, this is a post. You can edit sort of within this. Like you're not limiting them where they can edit. Right?
Correct. Yeah. So you can edit at the page level. You can edit at the collections level. And you can create certain collections for them. So you can create a blog collection and you can create a categories collection. And then they can go and edit the categories. If you've programmed the categories to work with the blog post, then you can have like a filtering system on your website. Yeah, and they don't have to know like terms like CMS or database structure or anything like that.
Right.
And they just see more user-friendly naming structures. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Make it super easy to. They also have like some variables where you can just add fields, and you can set the variable inside of the CMS. That's mostly when you're working with the CMS editor. Any other questions? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, you might have mentioned this, but does this have the ability to connect to backend databases?
Depends. So they do have something called integrations that they introduced, which I've never used, but I do know that you can use Zapier in order to connect pretty much anything. So if you have a form submission, you can have Zapier set up to collect that data and put it anywhere you want. You can also use Zapier to inject data into your site, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Let me see where that's not under. They do have an app section. I haven't messed with any of this. So like the ability to let people log into your website and have a closed CMS system. Maybe you have like courses that you want to sell. So you can have them sign up, purchase something, and then have an account where your web page is locked off to certain users. So they are working on adding some of this functionality. But as far as tapping into APIs, I know there's a way. I just don't personally do it very often. Yeah.
Quick question, Joshua. So you mentioned obviously you can export HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Can you import HTML, CSS, and JavaScript into Webflow?
Short answer, no. Long answer, not even. It's still a short answer. You can go from Figma to Webflow. So it'll convert everything from Figma into Webflow. Yeah. But as far as it's also super fast to just recreate things in Webflow.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me take a look. Maybe I will do a little demo. Let's see. I haven't done this in a long time. I'm a little bit so I have a lot of experience with Webflow, but I'm a little bit rusty in that I haven't made a website in a few months inside of Webflow, and I have to build this website, which is like I'm going to do it like today. So maybe I could get started on showing you what it's actually like to build this. How much time do we have? We've got like 20 minutes. Do we want to use that time to do that?
We've got time. I scheduled a little extra time. Just because I knew we were doing this, and probably have some discussion. So I'm certainly available to go over if you guys are.
Okay.
I'm more than happy to catch us out.
Yeah. So there's a few ways that I could actually start building this. I know how to do it from scratch, and I also have another workflow that I usually use, which is using tool that I purchased called System Flow. I'm not going to be using System Flow in this example because I wasn't using System Flow when I created this. And I don't believe that this is currently configured in such a way that would import using the plugin from Figma to Webflow. So those are like the two methodologies that I would normally use, but I could show you, this is like my trade secret. System Flow has all of these components, super standardized. Everything is using responsive, some sort of responsive framework. It has tons of variables, tons of icons, tons of different components. And like, this is just an example of something you can put together in under 10 minutes, right? If you're putting together wireframes for a customer and they tell you that they want certain things. So this is typically what I would use. And then the previous workflow was you just copy the name of it and then you bring it over to Webflow. And I'll show you. If I go back to my dashboard, I have the paid tool. I opened up my paid tool. I create a new section, not using elements or layouts, but using the components that came with the paid tool. And all I have to do is paste in the name of the item, and it's right there. So I can just drag it in. And now I have navbar light 1, which matches to navbar light 1. And it comes with like a little workflow in terms of, where is it, colors. All you have to do is update the topography and the colors. Sorry, the icons file is massive. Look how massive this icons file is. Sorry, I'm going to have a distraction moment. So many icons that just come inside of this thing that I purchased. So yeah, all you need to do is before you get started is update the color palette, update the topography, and it already has all of these components built in. So that's the first thing you do. And based on that alone, you'll get something that looks, it still looks cookie cutter, but it looks decent. And it's like a good starting point. And then all you have to do is add some like custom elements in the hero section to make it stand out from other websites. Okay, let's not do that. Let's close that. Let's open this. And let's see if I can at least do the navbar. So I'm just going to start by pulling this out. I'm actually going to flatten it. And then I'm going to export it as a SVG. Let's see how this works. Make a new folder. Webflow tutorial. Right. And then what do we have in terms of the color palette? Crazy. Primary color. This is a monochromatic website, all purple, but on the verge of indigo and blue, so it confuses people on purpose. I don't know why I did that, but I like that. All right, so I'm just going to edit this, replace the image, upload, open my folder, bring this in, use that. And we can see the sizing is off. I don't like that. So let's take a look at what size it's supposed to be. This is 206.45 width. Okay, done. One thing that I want to change globally before I get into all of the details, not doing them. This one, site settings. So I just want to make sure that my font is in here. Anybody? Fonts. Google Fonts is built in. Oh, I didn't show you this. Maybe I should walk you through this a little bit. This is the settings for the entire website. So you're going to have general settings, icons, time zone, if you want to have a password protected website, some additional stuff in here that I'm not 100% sure about. You can turn off the display this. You can also remove that from the HTML so people don't know how you created it. Fave icons, web clip icons. You can invite members to work on this project with you collaboratively. So if you have 2 or 3 people working on a website, you can all work on it at the same time. Publishing options. This is how you would set up your domain. And it has a little tutorial down here that it gives you. You can also do a little bit of like enabling SSL for security. So this way people aren't getting notifications that the website doesn't have SSL. You can minify the HTML, minify the CSS, minify the JavaScript. These are very basic features that are usually included in other programs. Pricing, SEO, integrations with Google Analytics, Google Optimize, Google Maps, Facebook Pixel, and then here's your API tokens and webhooks and the ability to authorize apps. Let's get over to the font section. I want a Google font called Anybody. I'm using bold. What else am I using? Poppins regular. I think these are all just bold. So I'm only going to include bold. Which bold is that? I believe. So that's going to be, it's probably 700. Latin, add the font, and then Poppin. Irregular. And the reason that we're only doing the bare minimum in terms of the fonts is because it takes a second for fonts to load. So you don't want to have to include a crazy amount of fonts. You don't want the entire family. They actually take a pretty long time to load. So don't do that. Only include exactly what you need. Now we're going to go back into the designer. So that's how easy it is to add fonts. Also, if you have the Adobe type font, whatever they call it these days, it has a little API token that you can use there, and it makes it super easy to use all of the Adobe fonts very quickly, very easily. Okay, now we're going to add the rest of the nav bar. So what do we have here? We've got 18 regular. Services, work. That this one will be made into a button. Actually going to put it over here. All. It's not going to go anywhere just yet. Okay. And then I want to change everything from Montserrat to Poppin. And then I want to change, let me take a look. There's probably a style guide inside of this template where I can change all of these headings pretty quickly. Which one's this? Heading jumbo, but they're all, here we go, H1. So my H1 is going to be 64 pixels. And then the height is going to be 130%. Makes it, spaces it out a little bit more. You also have additional typography settings over here. You can add shadow. You can apply a stroke directly to the text. You can also make the text a gradient. I believe there's a way to make this text a gradient. I don't know how to do that just yet, but I've seen it done, so I know it's possible. For now, I'm just going to add this font color that I like. Also standardize these colors. So I just added a new color. I'm going to hit the plus button, and it's going to auto name it to Midnight Blue. And I'm going to go ahead and create that. So I'm going to use that for text. And then I've got my primary button color. We have buttons. Buttons are over here. Here. This, I'm also going to save this. Great. And I could just call it primary button, but I'm not going to do that in this case. I like the naming that Webflow usually comes up with. Okay, so we've got our buttons over there and our H1. And I think I'm just going to do the H2 for now and not worry about doing every single one of these. What's my H2? $28. Okay. Dramatic in the difference between the H1 and the H2. Do I have a height setting on this? 130%. Okay. Font color, dark one. And I believe, yeah, so you can also force capitalization if you want to do that, which I'm doing that for this website. It looks a little bit more techy. And then we'll go ahead and we'll exit back over to the homepage. Let's see. I don't like this button. Okay, it doesn't look like they have their buttons set as components. Okay, style guide button wrap. And that's the actual button. I think in this case, we could just create a component. Back. Go to the home page. The nav bar is already a component. You can also embed components. So that's exactly what I'm going to do now, is I'm going to embed a component inside of here. Okay. What should this say? Oh, actually, if I edit the text as is by entering the instance, it will change the text across the entire website. So I don't want to do that. Because this is a button, it's likely going to have different text in different locations. You might want to use, I believe, there's a way to do this. Yeah, so you can add these little functions. So you can say, I want to add a custom ID, whether it's visible or not. I want to create a property that I can change later on. I want to see if there's anything else I can do. I want to change the text. Oh yeah, here we go. So create and connect this new property. Button text. And now I'm outside of the instance. Yeah. And I click into it, and then I can just tell it what to say. So it's like, oh. And I don't like how this is wrapping just yet. So let me take a look at the CSS. What are we doing? They're doing a flex layout. And there's only 2 items. It's not wrapping. Oh. So all of the items are inside of here. And then that's a flex child. Everything is set to grow if possible. Okay, so that's separate, that's separate, this is not inside of here. Maybe? No, I don't like any of that. Okay, it's been a long time. I'm not going to do all of the things that need to, actually, okay, let me do it. 0, 0. On the right-hand side, I want 0. And then I'm going to make, this is going to fill. I'm going to unlink the instance because I think I'll break it if I don't. Height should be 100%. And then I want to make this, see if I can do this. That's not going to work. A little clunky. It'll do. It'll do for now. So that's the nav bar. Services work. And if you want, you can create anchors. So if I have, so we've got my experience over here. I'm going to go ahead and create an ID called, I'm just going to copy the name, my experience. In fact, I'm going to leave that for the whole section. container. Yeah. Get to experience, and this one's going to be set to work. And on the nav bar, we've got the link, and we can set that to a section. And under the section, we're going to do services. Where's experience? Oh, maybe it's because it's not the section. Whatever, we'll just use contact. I'll do this for the button. Disability, section, contact. Preview, click it, it does the thing. Super fast. Everything's still responsive, except for, yeah. It takes a while to get used to, and I'm a little bit rusty, but like that's generally how you do things inside of Figma. And that was the component section, so it was a little bit more complicated because you saw me going into edit component with a nested component. Questions? Do more, keep going.
If you wanted, this is like a drag and drop thing from the sidebar.
There are some drag and drop capabilities that they've added. So they added in this system called layouts and libraries. So if you go over here to the add button, you have your traditional HTML elements, which you can drag in, or you can go over here to layouts and you can actually just drag in different nav bars. You can drag in featured components. This is the hero section, your team section, your logos, a gallery view. And then you can also, I believe, they're all free at the moment under resources, under market, libraries. So this is still in beta, so everything's free at the moment. And people have created drag and drop systems that work with Webflow. So System Flow looks like they have one. And it makes it nice and easy. So you can just get little components like this and you can drag them in as needed. So if we look at the hero section on my website, we know that it's going to look something like this. So I could just pop that in there. Come over here, take this image, copy it, export that, smiling, choose image, upload. And then I can start to add different effects. So I want to remove the padding at the bottom. Touching. Looks like there's a little shadow there. So I would have to re-export. But yeah, there are some drag and drop features. Let's see. Why is it? Oh, you know what? I must have made a mistake when I was creating the style. So we're going to do all H1s. Set to anybody. I believe it was. And we're going to make some adjustments. I don't like this container. 100% max width, that's too small. I like to do, I think, let me see. What is the number that I typically do? It's like 120. This is like the easiest cheater. Actually, I think there's another. Yeah, 120. It just shows up right there.
Mm-hmm.
So 100 max width. Sure that I'm changing the entire. Okay. Do that for now. because I don't know precisely what this container size is, precisely what this is. I think it would do something like this. So it's a width of 600. This should be a max width of 600 pixels. Now this can probably be set to work properly. Okay. It should be set to pop-ins. Currently 24. And 200.
Which one of these plans do most of your customers get everything they need?
Most of the customers will use the basic plan.
Demo
So when it comes to site plans,
basic.
most of them need basic. Most of them are startups. They're not necessarily creating blogs. They're not creating resource libraries or anything like that.
Mhm.
And I believe the limit for static pages is over 100 pages. So most customers don't need that many pages. They
Mhm.
mostly need like 6 or 10 or something like that.
Mhm.
And then, so they pay for this,
Okay.
which Webflow used to have this really cool feature where it was built in, the payment processing. I just had to send an email over to the customer using Webflow. They got
Mhm.
rid of that. So now I have to use PayPal to get people to subscribe
Mhm.
to my services and to pay for this bill.
Mhm.
And then this is what I use. So under workspaces, I'm a freelancer, and yeah, I don't need to bring in too many people. So these are like the limitations for a freelancer. So you need to pay for the designer and the hosting separate.
Okay.
Yeah. So as a designer, I pay for this, and then all of my customers pay for this.
Okay.
And that's billed yearly. If they're not confident in their business, you make it monthly. It's a bit more money.
Mhm.
But this is
Found this
Mhm.
easier though than did you find it easier than WordPress? And do you think that's because
yeah.
you got development behind you, or?
So a couple of things with that. So I did learn WordPress pretty extensively, and it took me a substantial amount of time to learn WordPress. And even when I was proficient in WordPress, the learning curve, I don't know, it felt like it kept growing,
Mhm.
but there's the security risk was the big thing for me. And implementing the actual infrastructure associated with WordPress. And I know there's services that handle that you can pay for. I just never use them. I did everything manually,
Mhm.
and it lowered the monthly cost for us, but it added to my workload. It added to the amount of time I had to do stuff.
Right.
So I ended up moving away from that and moving over to Webflow.
Yeah. I'm interested just because myself, I'm getting frustrated with how much time, like it used to be so easy. And nowadays it's just a lot of parameters and all of it's behind the scenes. So sometimes explaining it even to customers, like site looks good to me.
Yeah, they don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care how much time you're spending. They don't care. They just, as long as it works, right?
Right.
Pay
Right.
what I pay. I don't need to be the technologist. I don't need to know any of this stuff. Why are you telling me?
Right.
Is usually the general vibe. Let's see. Okay,
I
for
got
this.
a quick. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say I was gonna bring up another WordPress point since you guys were talking about WordPress. So I would say that one of the big issues with issues with WordPress is the plugins, particularly plugin compatibility, and managing that. And that's also one of the benefits of WordPress is the extensive repository of plugins. So from the standpoint of that, how do you feel that Webflow matches up to WordPress from both perspectives, the compatibility issue and also from the extensive volume of plugins that they have available?
Yeah. So my understanding of plugins when I was learning WordPress and comparing it to something like Jekyll or Webflow, is every single one of those plugins, you can go on their website and you can grab like usually an HTML embed that allows you to just place it where you want on your website using, the HTML embed feature, which is over here. So you can embed pretty much anything, and they'll tell you where to embed it to. So if you want to embed on page, you use this component, and you can just drop code inside of it. If you want to embed at the site level, say you want to add HubSpot, right? You would just go over to the settings panel, and then you would add the custom code that HubSpot walks you through. So when it comes to integrations, I'm very familiar just going into the technical documentation and following the instructions provided by the large corporation that's creating the Webflow plugin, and the ability for everyone else to use it as well. So oftentimes any plugin that you see on WordPress, you can just go to that company's website and they will have instructions for how to implement it on a bunch of different platforms. Like if you're using React or Vue or Angular, or you're using WordPress, or you're using Jekyll, it takes a little bit more understanding, I guess, but it's pretty straightforward. You're really just like following instructions. So it'd be like spot on. And I can say Webflow is starting to do that as well. So they have, let's see, I think it's under apps, but I don't really use this section. I do it the way that I explained, which is if I want to, I think they have, where is it? Where's the wordplay? Their add-on list. I find here plugins. Okay, and then like HubSpot or Mailchimp is super common, right? You would just click a button and download it. But if you wanted to add HubSpot to site, connect your domain right here, getting started. You just come to here and usually just follow the instructions. And it's usually pretty straightforward. You just type in the domain. You tell, let me see. I think this one is telling us how to connect your domain. We don't want that. We don't want to build a website.
I kind of get what Omari is saying, though. Like, for instance, like we have something like Contact Form 7, right, which is like a pretty popular contact form plugin for WordPress. But then there's all these ancillary sort of plugins. So like, there's a way to get all of those like form requests into like a database, right? And you can use something like Flamingo. And that's not something that you can really just kind of copy and paste onto like a piece of paper because it's purely backend, right? And that's just one example, and there are many. And this is, I mean, yeah, larger companies have great documentation, and you'll be able to integrate them. On like a flat HTML thing, and you'll be able to integrate it onto Webflow or React or any of these other sort of frameworks. But I guess the sort of like independent nature of WordPress, where they're creating sort of plugins that support, like backend marketing, that sort of stuff, outside of these large corporations is, I think, kind of what Omari's talking about, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of functionality that I'm not sure you definitely wouldn't be able to paste into your website like that. So,
I don't really spend much time doing those types of things. Like, I will usually find a workaround. So like if somebody's using a different form technology, I'll just understand, I'll ask questions, try to understand what the current workflow is, and then see if I can find a better workflow that has better automation. And that's usually what I'll try to implement. Yeah,
Zapier is like a great way to sort of like bridge that gap.
Yeah,
sure. And also just kind of related to that, I mean, in your experience, I mean, have you seen, what are the use cases in your opinion that where you would prefer to leverage WordPress over Webflow? Where you say, okay,
Um,
Webflow is probably the limit of what I can do with Webflow. I'm going to need a platform like WordPress or Magento or what another platform. I'm not sure if you use Magento, but what would be an
yeah,
example of something like that for you?
yeah. So for me, it depends, right? So there's two major use cases that most startups and most small businesses need. Obviously, everybody has a grander vision and a larger scope to their projects than what might actually be feasible within 1 year. So typically, I'll try to reduce their scope and avoid getting into those technologies. But so I mostly just focus on brochure websites, content creator websites. Like if you have a blog, if you do press releases, you're doing the typical, like, I'm adding case studies here and there, I'm adding blogs, and I have some services and a contact us page, like a super basic website. So those are mostly the websites that I focus on. And then I do have a couple of customers, they have like a login system. I typically wouldn't use WordPress if it required any sort of, Webflow, if it required any sort of user login. So I know that Webflow is working on that. They do have some stuff, but I would go over to something like bubble.io at that point, which is my preferred visual development software. The only thing that I don't like about Bubble is you can't export it. So I do want to find an alternative. I believe Framer is the best alternative at the moment. So I just have to do more research on that, but I'm not looking forward to ever going into WordPress. I look at the software as like, it's a jack of all trades that's, vulnerable to a lot of things because of all of those plugins. And I just don't like the security risk associated with it. That's why I avoid it more so than anything else. The sheer maintenance and security risk associated with it, and like the backups that you need to do. And then if you're configuring everything to save another quick buck, it's even more work. And yeah, I would rather use WordPress, Wix, Squarespace, Shopify, Bubble.io, because the maintenance is so much lighter. Yeah. And I enjoy I get easily motivated when I'm working on a new project. So I like working on new projects consistently. Yeah. That makes sense.
Thank
That
you.
answers I don't know if that answers your question.
I would
Yeah,
like
for sure.
just to explore the Lottie websites.
Yeah. What I'm showing right now, I'll show Lottie in a second. What I'm showing right now, so Flowbase is a company that specializes in creating stuff for Webflow. There's a lot of these companies. Webflow is super popular. Over 200,000 companies are using it right now. Even enterprise level companies. So it passes all of the due diligence for large companies like Nike, and those security things that I was talking about. But here's like a downloadable thing if you wanted to show a before and after on your design portfolio. This is like a cool way to do it. And then Lottie animations can be created on the internet. They're supported by a majority of the companies out there. Like Bubble.io has a plugin. Webflow has it integrated directly, and you can create super optimized Lottie files on the internet. But also Adobe After Effects has a plugin that lets you create them as well. Yeah. So the idea is they're ultra small in comparison to even a GIF. So it's not a video, it's image files or like a JSON file. Yeah. And let's discover some animations. You can also just download some of these. Like you could just hit the download button and then bring it into your website so you don't have to do anything. If you see something generic like confetti, right, that you're adding to your app and you want the confetti to load.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can have these run automatically. You can have them show up as a loading screen. You can have them show up on the 404 page. You can have them show up as a scroll interaction. Let me see. So
I
Lottie.
get confetti.
See what they have in the university. So here's an overview for Lottie. So they're going to show you everything. This is actually one of their longer videos. I just want to see the effect. Good. I like to play with space ideas. Yeah, so it's not finished. This is it. Turn on the Lottie animation. It's going to be a scroll action. It's going to be the entirety of the page or the entirety of the component. They're going to preview it. And then as you scroll, you get to see the animation. Yeah. And they have a bunch of these.
I'd love to figure out one of these for my drop shipping site as a landing for a product and then push them over maybe to the buy or something. But it's cool, you know, you got to compete with all this, you got to compete with everything out there. So it's kind of cool to show them some animation.
I did have one question that like WordPress is terrible with. Page transitions. I tried to like integrate Barba into WordPress and it was just an absolute nightmare. Like it can't really sort of like, I mean, it can. It just took a ton of like JavaScript to sort of get everything working, but it doesn't understand like how to store the URL sort of like automatically, right? Like when you go from one page to another and sort of like animating those transitions. Do you know if sort of like Webflow has kind of like, because I'm guessing it's built into JavaScript, right? Where it's like PHP isn't really kind of getting that, but Java might.
Yeah, so I don't mess with page transitions. What I will mess with is like creating custom sliders or a custom scroll. So this way you can achieve similar effects without actually going from one page to another page. Like if you're trying to create a step form that has animation on it, like that, I would just keep all inside of one page and just use a tabular system or a slider system in order to create the widget with the animations. Yeah. And I actually have one of those I can show off. So this was my website that I redesigned, but this is the original website. And it has step form with some animation if you want to see that, right?
Sure.
So I believe, tell me about your project. You get a little bit of animation, nothing crazy, a little pop animation there. And then next, a quick little fade, ultra fast animations. You know, you tell me about your thing, you know, what resources you have, what type of business you are. And it's just really small, simple animations, nothing crazy. And you keep it all on one page.
That looks nice. I like the cards.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, generally I try to avoid doing complicated things because I'm not getting paid that much. So if someone asks me to do something complicated, like create page transitions, I'm going to tell them we could do it, but I'm going to charge you for that time. And it's not going to be fun for either of us. So it's also, it doesn't, and the way that I sell that is like, it doesn't enhance the user experience. It's not going to increase conversion rate. It's probably not worth the ROI that you're looking. Like, it's a great idea. I'm not going to knock a great idea, but it's a time consuming idea. You have that feasibility viability diagram. If you've ever seen it, it's feasible. It's just, it's not viable because it's not going to push the needle. You know, oftentimes I just won't do animation because it looks like it loads way faster and people can get started right away. Like if it's a client that's spending around 2,000, I don't deal with too much animation. I reserve the advanced stuff for like the 10,000 tier.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hopefully that was useful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I thought it was awesome. Yeah, definitely helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
yeah, it's Webflow is super powerful. It's also extremely popular. It only amounts to a small percentage of websites using it at the moment, but I like it way better than most of the other software. And I try to avoid WordPress at all costs simply because of security and maintenance, honestly. And most customers don't want to go in and do the editing themselves. But Webflow, if they only want to learn the editor, it takes about 20 minutes to learn. I trained 3 people on how to use Webflow, and each training session was only 20 minutes. And they were like, at that point, they felt confident enough to make changes to a production website. So it's also like, that was something that I was measuring when I was working with WordPress and when I was working with Webflow and when I was working with Jekyll, is like, how much training am I going to need to do to off this to somebody else? And Webflow was the shortest duration of time that I've ever seen for non-technicals, non-designers, just marketers to come in and business savvy people to come in and get going.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you're interested in joining us, click the link down below. See you soon.